OpenAI is on the move legally. They have filed for a patent for GPT-5. It is rumored that it's training right now, that it may be done by the end of the year. Some people think it's going to achieve AGI. We'll have to wait and see. RT-2 is a new vision language action robot from Google's DeepMind. So this is basically a robot arm with a camera that also has an LLM type brain. What they did here is they trained a model on web and robotics data such that it can take image or text prompts and convert them into instructions, basically come up with a plan, and then also output actual actions that the robot can take to, for example, pick up a banana. The reason they say web and robotics data here is because the model's actually trained on some data that's been collected in a laboratory from a bunch of these robots doing experiments, and then also some normal kind of visual question answering data. Is this a banana? Yes, this is a banana. From that process, the robot gains an understanding of what different objects are. It gains an understanding of text such that you can give it a text prompt, and then it can learn to output or understand the semantics of that text prompt, understand the command that is being made, and then come up with a plan to execute. I think the interesting thing here is that actual motions in space have been converted into tokens. So the outputs of this model, give it an input, pick up the banana that's on the table, has a camera view of the table, and then it will respond maybe something like, okay, I will pick up the banana, or here's how to pick up the banana, and then a string of numbers and different numbers that represent actual spaces in 3D space, and then yaw and tilt and pitch of the arm. So it's cool to see that the LLM type approach can apply to actions in 3D space as well. IBM and NASA just released a geospatial AI foundational model, 100% open source. This is a model that's currently fine-tuned for flood and burn scar mapping, and it's demonstrated to date a 15% improvement, which is a huge improvement over state-of-the-art techniques using half as much labeled data. So this model has shown promise as being really good at solving climate-related tasks, and now that it's been opened up to the research community, they'll be able to apply additional fine-tuning and tune it for tasks such as tracking deforestation or predicting crop yields or detecting and monitoring greenhouse gases. I think this could be a huge accelerator for climate research because with a really powerful model like this at their fingertips, the researchers can focus on collecting excellent data and running tests rather than needing to develop a new model by themselves. Speaking of open source, Meta just open sourced AudioCraft, which is a set of audio and music Gen AI models. You can go test them out yourself. They do make sounds that are slightly convincing. They make music that is passively music. It's not great to listen to. And I have to wonder, is Meta really benevolent here, or does music Gen AI just not really have a lot of value? Do people really want AI generated music? That being said, AI generated vocals have been used in the past for music tracks, and those are pretty convincing and went viral and actually had to be taken down. Quick note on jailbreaking for LLMs. For those of you that haven't heard of jailbreaking, it is a text prompt that you can provide to a model like Bard or ChatGPT that will basically derail it or jailbreak it. Remember when you could jailbreak your iPhone and you could download all sorts of crazy apps and features that aren't approved by Apple? Basically, this is what you're doing for your GPT model, where you're taking it off the rails such that it no longer abides by any of the rules or restrictions that OpenAI has put on it. There's a paper that I recommend you read if you find this stuff interesting, just recently released, called Universal and Transferable Adversarial Attacks on Aligned Language Models. What these people did is found an automatic way to construct jailbreak prompts. Jailbreak prompts, previously you would pull off of GitHub threads or Reddit threads or a special website that was out there for a while for jailbreak prompts that people were writing out by hand. They came up with an automatic way to construct these, and they've written thousands of them that completely derail the model. You just insert it into the model, you submit it, and if it's a chat-based model, then future messages that you send it will be totally jailbroken. You can start a new instance of the model, and that's fine. It'll forget that. If it's a prompt completion model, then you just enter the prompt and then you ask your question after. It's completely jailbroken. There's really no good way to defend against these. The takeaway is that LLMs are certainly useful, but are they safe and reliable as part of an enterprise? Can you really build an application with them and have it be safe? We basically need to consider an LLM as an adversary at all times when building secure systems. The LLM is always a hacker. Something to think about. An interesting quote from the Department of Defense recently regarding Ukraine. I'm just going to read part of this quote out. This is Merrick Garland, who is high up in the Department of Defense. They say there is an extraordinary laboratory for understanding the changing character of war and Russia's unprovoked aggression on Ukraine. To be clear, it is a horrible thing, but it is occurring and we have to try to learn from it. And I can tell you there are really robust efforts across the department to ensure that we figure out what we're learning, how and what ways does it impact how we understand that changing character of war. We also understand other countries are learning too. I think a piece of that is absolutely the role of drones and artificial intelligence. Basically, Department of Defense is saying that Ukraine is an extraordinary laboratory for testing AI weapons in war. In other international news, in China, the US has imposed trade sanctions. These have existed for a while, and these sanctions have restricted the computational power of chips sold from Western manufacturers to Chinese consumers and Chinese enterprises. Or in other words, you can't sell high-performant hardware to China. You have to sell less performant hardware to China. China is naturally trying to become self-sufficient in chip manufacturing. They don't want to be reliant on Western hardware. The China Natural Science Fund is pumping a lot of money into chips manufactured in China. And there are manufacturers such as More Threads that have GPUs that you can buy that are not great, but they do perform okay, and they may be performant enough for AI applications. AMD wants to ramp up chip production in China. They see it as a huge unexpanded new market. So AMD is going to need to roll out a whole bunch of these new lower quality chips that meet performance limits, but could be a huge market for AMD and make them even more competitive with NVIDIA. In other China news, Apple removed AI apps from China because this past July, China announced a set of measures to regulate Gen AI services. And that includes API providers. And these rules require AI apps operating in China to obtain an administrative license. That was reflected in Apple's removal notice. They don't have an administrative license. We don't know if they're working on getting one, but rather than get one right now, they've decided to remove their applications entirely. So these new measures regulating generative AI services could mean that generative AI applications will not be deployed, or deployment of them may be more complex in China. So we'll have to see how that plays out. Thanks for tuning in this week. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and you'll get a notification for our episode next week. Or you can check out our daily newsletter. Y'all take it easy.